Okay, so welcome everyone to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking into the global in vivo toxicology market.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, right. And we have this pretty comprehensive market analysis. We'll be pulling out all the juicy insights for you. It'll be great if by the end of this, we have a good understanding of, the current state of this market and, more importantly, where it's headed. We'll try to cover things like, well, the numbers, of course, like how big is this market, which regions are really driving the growth, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's good to start with a solid definition, before we get into the
Oh,
specifics.
yeah, absolutely.
So, in vivo toxicology, it's basically the study of how different substances affect living organisms.
Right, right.
And this is really crucial. I mean, this is fundamental for ensuring the safety of, well, everything, from the pharmaceuticals we use to the chemicals in, like everyday
You're
products.
talking about testing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. It's all about that rigorous testing that helps us be confident that, the stuff we use, it's actually safe.
Right, so it's like we kind of take it for granted, but there's this whole massive industry behind that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a growing one too. I mean, based on this report.
Oh, you're talking about the big numbers, right?
Yeah, yeah. So in 2025, this market, the global market, it's estimated to be worth a whopping USD 524.6 million.
Wow, that's a pretty substantial figure for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. And get this, by 2033, it's projected to hit USD 1,469.35 million.
Hold on, that's more than double.
It is. And that reflects a CGR, a compound annual growth rate of 5.60%. So it's not just growing, it's accelerating.
So there's some serious forces propelling this, right? Like what's driving this kind of growth?
Well, there are a lot of factors. I think a big one is the demand for safety. People are becoming more and more aware of potential risks, and they want products that are safe.
Right, that makes sense. Like we're more informed as consumers now.
Mhm. Exactly. And then they are the innovations within the field itself, like we're constantly developing better ways to test and assess safety.
So more accurate testing.
Exactly. And of course, there's the whole regulatory landscape, the rules and guidelines that companies have to
Oh,
follow.
so that sets the standards.
Yeah, exactly. And all of these things combined are creating this huge wave of growth in the in vivo toxicology market.
So the market, the global market, is expected to be worth USD 524.6 million in 2025. And that CAGR, that 5.60%, that's a pretty significant number.
Yeah, it is. And the report is very clear that the main driver is this. The increasing demand for safer products, whether it's medicines or chemicals, people just want to know that what they're using is safe.
Right, right. That's a pretty fundamental principle, isn't it?
It really is. And as we as a society, I guess, understand more about health and the potential risks, then naturally we need better testing, more sophisticated testing.
Right, so the testing has to evolve as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, the global population is aging. There's a huge emphasis on preventative healthcare these days. So the demand for new and safer treatments, it's just going to keep going up.
Right.
And that means, even more demand for rigorous toxicology testing.
It all makes sense. So it's not just about testing the things we have now, it's about making sure that the new stuff coming out is safe too.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's get a bit more specific. Let's break down this global market by region. The report tells us that North America, they're kind of holding the reins right now. They've got the biggest market share.
Yeah, they do. It's over 40%.
Yeah,
Yeah, with a market size of, let me check, USD 2,609.84 million in 2025.
that's a significant chunk.
Yeah, no doubt. But interestingly, their projected growth rate is a bit more moderate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a CAGR of 3.8% between 2025 and 2033.
Okay, so North America's already a big player, but their growth isn't as explosive as some other regions, perhaps.
That's right. And I think it's interesting to look at the individual markets within North America.
Yeah, let's do that.
So the US obviously is the biggest player there. They're estimated to have a market size of USD 2059.16 million in 2025. But their projected CAGR is 3.6%, so a little lower than the overall North American average.
Interesting.
Now, Canada and Mexico, they're smaller markets, of course. Canada's at USD 313.18 million, and Mexico's at USD 237.50 million. But their projected growth rates are a bit higher. Canada's looking at a CAGR of 4.6%, and Mexico's at 4.3%.
So even though they're starting from a smaller base, they're expected to grow a bit faster.
Exactly. And I think this just shows that the market dynamics are a bit different in each country, even within the same region.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are the factors that keep North America in the lead, so to speak?
Well, the report points to several things. First, there's a lot of investment in pharmaceutical research and development in North America, particularly in the U.S. There's a lot of innovation happening there.
Right.
And then there's a very strong emphasis on drug safety in North America. The regulatory bodies are really focused on making sure that drugs are safe and effective.
So the bar is set pretty high.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are the regulations themselves. North America has some of the most stringent regulations in the world when it comes to drug development and testing.
So companies really have to go the extra mile to meet those standards.
They do. And all of this combined has created a very mature and well-established industry infrastructure in North America. So they have the expertise, they have the technology, and they have the regulatory framework to support a strong in vivo toxicology market.
Right, so they've got a solid foundation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so North America is a bit of a mature market. Now let's move on to Europe. What's happening over there?
Well, Europe is another major player in the global market. They hold over 30% of the market share with a size of USD 1957.38 million in 2025. And their projected CAGR is 4.1%.
So a little bit faster growth than North America.
Yeah, slightly. But again, we see some interesting variations when we look at the individual countries.
Oh, okay, let's break that down a little.
So the UK, for example, they're projected to have a pretty decent CAGR of 4.9%. Their market size in 2025 is estimated to be USD 328.84 million.
Right.
Now, Germany, their market is larger at USD 387.56 million, but their projected growth is a little bit slower at 4.3%.
Okay.
And then you've got France and Russia. Both of them have markets around USD 303.39 million, but their projected growth is even slower, around 3.1% for Russia and 3.3% for France.
Okay, so slower growth in those markets.
Yeah. And the rest of Europe,
Right.
all the other countries combined, they're projected to grow at around 2.8%.
So it's really a mixed bag in Europe.
It is. And it's interesting to look at what's driving these trends.
Yeah, what's the report say?
Well, just like in North America, stringent regulations are a big factor in Europe. They have a really strong regulatory framework for drug development and testing.
Right.
And then there's R&D investment. Europe is investing a lot in biotechnology and pharmaceutical research.
So they're trying to stay at the forefront of innovation.
Exactly. And then there's something else that's really interesting in Europe. The focus on reducing animal testing.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, so there's a real push in Europe to develop and adopt alternative testing methods.
So methods that don't involve animals.
Exactly. And this is having a big impact on the in vivo toxicology market in Europe because it's driving the development of new technologies and approaches.
So it's like they're kind of leading the way in that sense.
They are in many ways.
That's interesting. Okay, so we've talked about North America, which is a mature market, and Europe, where there's a strong focus on alternatives. Now let's shift gears and look at a region where the growth is really taking off. Asia Pacific.
Yeah, this is where things are getting really exciting.
So right now, Asia Pacific has about 23% of the global market share, with a size of USD 1,500.66 million in 2025.
Right.
But their projected CAGR is a whopping 7.6%.
Yeah, that's significantly higher than what we're seeing in North America or Europe.
So they're catching up fast.
They are. And if you look at the individual countries, it's even more impressive.
Okay, give me the numbers.
So China, which is the biggest market in the region, their market size in 2025 is estimated to be USD 630.28 million, and their projected CAGR is 7.1%.
Okay.
Then you have India with a market size of USD 180.08 million in 2025, but their projected CAGR is even higher at 9.4%.
Wow.
And then there's Southeast Asia, which is a smaller market at USD 136.71 million in 2025. But they're projected to grow at a massive 12.7%.
So Southeast Asia is the real star in terms of growth.
They are. And even the rest of Asia Pacific, all the other countries combined, they're projected to grow at a healthy 7.4%.
So what's fueling this explosive growth in Asia Pacific?
Well, there are several factors. One is the increasing R&D activity in the region. There's a lot of investment in pharmaceuticals and biotechnology in Asia Pacific.
They're really pushing the boundaries in those areas.
They are. And then there's the growing prevalence of chronic diseases in the region. This is a global trend, but it's particularly pronounced in Asia Pacific.
Right, and that's driving the need for more healthcare solutions, more treatments.
Exactly. And then there's the expansion of contract research organizations, or CROs, in the region. These are companies that provide research services to pharmaceutical and biotech companies.
So they're kind of like outsourcing partners.
Yeah, exactly. And CROs are playing a big role in the growth of the in vivo toxicology market in Asia Pacific because they're providing the expertise and infrastructure that's needed to conduct these complex studies.
It's like a whole ecosystem developing there.
It is. And then there are the regulatory advancements. Many countries in Asia Pacific are updating their regulations to be more in line with international standards.
So they're raising the bar.
They are. And then finally, there's the government support. Many governments in Asia Pacific are recognizing the importance of the life sciences industry and are providing incentives and support to encourage its growth.
So they're really creating a favorable environment for this market to thrive.
They are.
It's a pretty amazing story, really. Okay, so we've talked about North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. Let's move on to Latin America. What's happening there?
Well, Latin America is a smaller market with a share of just over 5%. Their market size in 2025 is estimated to be USD 326.23 million, and their projected CAGR is 5.0%.
So not as dramatic as Asia Pacific, but still decent growth.
Yeah, definitely. And the main drivers in Latin America are similar to what we're seeing in other regions. There's a growing pharmaceutical and biotech sector, increasing investment in R&D, and evolving regulatory frameworks.
Right, so they're kind of following a similar path.
They are, and Brazil and Argentina are the key markets in Latin America.
Okay, what are their numbers?
Brazil's market size is estimated to be USD 139.63 million in 2025, with a CAGR of 5.6%. And Argentina's market is smaller at USD 54.81 million, but their CAGR is a bit higher at 5.9%.
So some good potential there.
Definitely.
Okay, and finally, let's talk about the Middle East and Africa. What's the situation there?
So this is the smallest market we've talked about, with a share of just around 2%. Their market size in 2025 is estimated to be USD 130.49 million. And their projected CAGR is 5.3%.
Okay, so even though it's a smaller market, there's still growth happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And the drivers in this region are similar to what we've seen elsewhere. The increasing prevalence of chronic diseases is a big factor, along with a growing commitment to R&D and a greater focus from governments on improving healthcare infrastructure.
So they're kind of playing catch-up in a way.
They are, but they're definitely making progress.
Great. So we've taken a tour around the world, looking at the regional variations in the in vivo toxicology market. Now let's dig a little deeper and look at how the market is segmented.
Sounds good.
So the first segmentation is by product type. And the report tells us that consumables are the dominant product segment right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, consumables are the things you need on an ongoing basis to run a toxicology lab. Things like, the animal models themselves, reagents, kits, all those basic lab supplies.
Right. So it's the stuff that gets used up and needs to be constantly replenished.
Exactly. It's like the fuel that keeps the engine running.
Makes sense. Now, which product segment is projected to grow the fastest?
Well, this is interesting. It's actually animal models.
Really? I thought there was this big push towards alternative testing methods.
Yeah, there is. But the thing is, animal models are still considered the gold standard for a lot of toxicology testing.
So why is that?
Well, because they're really good at replicating the complex physiological responses we see in living organisms. They can give you a really good idea of how a substance is going to affect an entire biological system.
So they're still essential for a lot of research.
Absolutely. And they're particularly important for regulatory safety assessments, especially for new drugs. The regulatory bodies want to see data from animal studies to be sure that a drug is safe.
Right. So there's still a strong need for animal models, even though there's a lot of work being done on alternatives.
Yes.
Okay, so that's product type. Now let's move on to test type. The report says that acute testing is currently the dominant segment.
Right. Acute testing is basically about looking at the immediate effects of a substance after a single short-term exposure.
Okay, so it's like what happens right away.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a really important type of testing because it helps to identify any substances that are immediately harmful.
So it's a kind of a first line of defense.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. And it's also a requirement for regulatory approval. The regulatory bodies want to see data from acute toxicity studies to make sure that a substance is not going to cause any immediate harm.
Right, so it's a critical part of the safety assessment process. Now, what about the test type that's projected to grow the fastest?
So that would be subchronic testing.
Subchronic, what's that about?
Well, subchronic testing is about looking at the effects of repeated exposure to a substance over a longer period of time, typically around 90 days.
Okay, so it's like what happens if you're exposed to something over and over again?
Yeah, exactly. And this type of testing is becoming increasingly important because it can help to identify substances that might not cause any immediate harm, but that could be harmful over the long term.
Right, so it's about understanding the cumulative effects of exposure.
Exactly. And I think the fact that subchronic testing is projected to grow the fastest just reflects the increasing focus on long-term safety and the growing awareness of the potential for substances to have delayed or cumulative effects.
So it's kind of like a more nuanced approach to safety assessment?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so that's test type. Now let's look at testing facility. The report says that outsourced facilities are currently dominating the market.
Yeah, and this makes sense for a lot of companies. Outsourcing toxicology testing can be a lot more cost-effective than doing it in-house.
So why is that?
Well, for one thing, you don't have to build and maintain your own lab, and you don't have to hire and train your own staff.
Right, so it's a big investment to set up your own lab.
It is. And then there's the expertise factor. Outsourced facilities often have a lot of experience in conducting toxicology studies. They know the regulations, they have the latest technology, and they have a team of experts who can interpret the results.
So you're basically tapping into their knowledge and experience.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's outsourced facilities. Now, what about the fastest growing segment in this category?
Well, this might surprise you, but it's actually in-house testing labs.
Really? So companies are moving away from outsourcing.
Well, not exactly. It's more like some companies are finding that it makes sense to bring some of their testing in-house.
Okay, so why would they do that?
Well, there are a few reasons. One is cost control. Even though outsourcing can be cheaper in the short term, it can actually be more expensive in the long run if you're doing a lot of testing.
Right, so if you're doing it constantly, it might be more economical to have your own setup,
Exactly. And then there's the turnaround time factor. If you're outsourcing your testing, you have to send your samples to the lab and then wait for the results.
which can take time.
Yeah, and that can slow down your research and development process. So some companies are finding that it's faster to do the testing in-house.
So it's about speed and efficiency.
Exactly. And then there's the control factor. If you're doing the testing in-house, you have more control over the whole process.
So you can kind of tailor it to your specific needs.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also be sure that the testing is being done to your standards.
So it's about quality control as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's testing facility. Now let's move on to toxicity endpoint. The report says that systemic toxicity is the dominant segment here.
Right. Systemic toxicity is basically about looking at the effects of a substance on the whole body.
So it's not just about one specific organ or system.
Yeah, exactly. It's about looking at the overall impact of the substance on the body's functions.
And why is this type of testing so important?
Well, because it helps to identify substances that might be harmful to multiple organ systems.
So it's kind of a big picture view of safety.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And it's a really important part of the safety assessment process because it helps to ensure that a substance is not going to cause any widespread or systemic harm.
Right, so it's about looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about the fastest growing segment in this category?
So that would be genotoxicity testing.
Genotoxicity, that sounds serious.
It is. Genotoxicity testing is specifically about looking at whether a substance can damage DNA.
And why is that important?
Well, because DNA damage can lead to mutations, which can then lead to cancer.
Right, so it's about understanding the potential for a substance to cause cancer.
Exactly. And genotoxicity testing is becoming increasingly important because of the growing awareness of the link between environmental exposures and cancer risk.
So there's a lot more focus on this type of testing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that it's the fastest growing segment just reflects the increasing concern about the potential for substances to cause cancer.
Makes sense. Okay, so that's toxicity endpoint. Now let's look at the final segmentation, which is by end user. And the report tells us that pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies are currently the dominant end users of in vivo toxicology services.
Yeah, that's not surprising. I mean, these companies are the ones who are developing new drugs and therapies.
Right, so they need to make sure those drugs are safe.
Exactly. And in vivo toxicology testing is a key part of the drug development process.
So it's a big part of their business.
It is. And it's also a big part of ensuring that new drugs are safe and effective for patients.
Absolutely. Now, what about the fastest growing segment in this category?
So the fastest growing segment is contract research organizations, or CROs.
CROs. We've talked about them before.
Yeah, we have. And their growth really reflects the increasing trend of outsourcing in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries.
Right, so more and more companies are choosing to outsource their in vivo toxicology testing to CROs.
Exactly. And there are a few reasons for this. One is cost, as we've discussed, but there's also the expertise factor. CROs often have a lot of experience in conducting these types of studies, and they can provide a level of expertise that many companies just don't have in-house.
So it's kind of a win-win situation. The companies get access to the expertise they need, and the CROs get more business.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the key segments in the in vivo toxicology market. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture again. What are the main drivers of this market?
Well, we've talked about some of them already, but I think it's worth summarizing them here. So first, there's the increasing demand for safer pharmaceuticals and chemicals. This is a global trend, and it's driving the need for more rigorous testing.
Right, so it's all about safety.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the technological advancements that are happening in the field of toxicology. We're constantly developing new and better ways to test substances for their safety.
So the technology is getting more sophisticated.
It is, and that's allowing us to do more accurate and efficient testing.
Okay, so that's technology. What else?
Well, there's the increasing adoption of alternative testing methods. This is being driven by a number of factors, including ethical concerns about animal testing and the desire to reduce costs.
Right, so there's a lot of pressure to move away from animal testing.
Yeah, there is. And this is leading to the development of new in vitro testing methods, which are methods that don't involve animals.
So that's a pretty big shift.
It is.
And
And it's having a big impact on the in vivo toxicology market.
Okay, and finally, there's the growing emphasis on personalized medicine. This is a relatively new trend, but it's having a big impact on the way we think about drug development and testing.
Yeah, personalized medicine is all about tailoring treatments to individual patients.
So it's about understanding how different people respond to different drugs.
Exactly. And in vivo toxicology testing has a role to play in this because it can help us to understand how different individuals might respond to a particular drug based on their genetic makeup or other factors.
So it's about getting more specific with our testing.
Ex-
Okay, so those are the main drivers. Now, what about the restraints? What are the things that might be holding back the growth of this market?
Well, one of the biggest restraints is cost. In vivo toxicology testing can be very expensive, especially if you're doing a lot of it.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, and this can be a barrier for smaller companies or research groups who might not have the resources to conduct these types of studies.
So it's kind of a challenge for those who don't have deep pockets.
It is. And then there are the ethical and regulatory concerns about animal testing. There's a lot of public pressure to reduce or eliminate animal testing.
Yeah, and that's leading to stricter regulations and more scrutiny of animal research.
Exactly. And this can make it more difficult and expensive to conduct in vivo toxicology studies.
So it's a bit of a balancing act.
It is. We need to ensure the safety of new drugs and chemicals, but we also need to be mindful of the ethical implications of animal testing.
Right, so it's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Ex-
Okay, so those are the restraints. Now let's finish up by talking about the key trends that are shaping the future of this market. The report highlights the increasing adoption of advanced technologies, like 3D cell cultures and organ-on-a-chip models.
Yeah, these are really exciting technologies. They have the potential to revolutionize the way we do toxicology testing.
So how do they work?
Well, 3D cell cultures are basically just what they sound like. They're cell cultures that are grown in 3 dimensions rather than the traditional 2 dimensions.
Okay.
And this allows them to more accurately mimic the structure and function of real tissues and organs.
So they're more realistic.
They are, and organ-on-a-chip models are even more sophisticated. They're basically miniature organs that are created on a microchip.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And these models can be used to study the effects of substances on specific organs without having to use animals.
So they're a really promising alternative to animal testing.
They are, and they're also very efficient because they allow you to test multiple substances on the same chip.
So it's a faster and more cost-effective way to do toxicology testing.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's advanced technologies. What else?
Well, the other big trend is the growing regulatory pressure for safer drug development, coupled with the desire to reduce animal testing.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah. And this is leading to a lot of changes in the way toxicology testing is conducted.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, there's a lot more emphasis on early safety testing. Companies are now being encouraged to do more toxicology testing early in the drug development process so that they can identify any potential problems before they invest a lot of time and money.
So it's about catching problems early on.
Exactly. And then there's the increasing use of alternative testing methods. Regulatory bodies are now more willing to accept data from alternative testing methods as long as those methods are scientifically valid.
So there's more flexibility in the way testing can be done.
Yeah, there is. And that's creating a lot of opportunities for companies that are developing new and innovative toxicology testing methods.
So it's a really exciting time to be in this field.
It is.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Let's quickly summarize the key takeaways. So the global in vivo toxicology market is projected to grow significantly in the coming years, driven by the increasing demand for safer pharmaceuticals and chemicals, technological advancements, the adoption of alternative testing methods, and the growing emphasis on personalized medicine.
Right. And we've seen that the market is segmented in a number of ways by product type, testing facility, toxicity endpoint, and end user. And we've looked at the key drivers and restraints that are shaping the market.
Yeah, and we've seen that there are some exciting trends emerging, like the increasing adoption of advanced technologies and the growing regulatory pressure for safer drug development.
Exactly.
And just to remind everyone, the market is estimated to be worth USD 524.6 million in 2025 and is projected to reach USD 524.6 million by 2033. That's a pretty impressive growth trajectory.
It is, and it just highlights the importance of this market and the vital role it plays in ensuring the safety of the products we use every day.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for everyone to ponder. We've talked about the increasing adoption of alternative testing methods, but we've also seen that animal models are still the fastest growing product segment. So how do you think this tension between traditional and alternative testing methods is going to play out in the future? Will we eventually see a world where animal testing is completely eliminated, or will animal models continue to play an important role in toxicology testing?
It's a really interesting question, and I think the answer is it's probably going to be a bit of both. We're constantly developing new and better alternative testing methods. But animal models are still very valuable for certain types of research, particularly when we need to understand the complex effects of a substance on the whole body.
So it's about finding the right balance.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the key is to use the most appropriate testing methods for each situation, whether that's an alternative method or an animal model. And we need to be constantly evaluating new methods and technologies to make sure we're using the best tools available.
Right, so it's all about progress and innovation.
It is. And it's about ensuring that we're doing everything we can to protect human health and the environment.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks everyone for listening.